What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on the Soren Baker Show. Thank you for listening to us on the Digital Soapbox Network and for watching us on Unique Access. We appreciate you guys' support. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, download, stream, all that good stuff, man. The Soren Baker Show, Digital Soapbox Network, so that we can keep coming to you guys every week. You know, we're having the good fortune of having a great number of esteemed guests and a steady stream of them, and a lot of different people coming through, and today is no exception, which is I'm very grateful for. Our guest today is someone that I've known since the 90s and have known in different incarnations, and we're going to get into a lot of that today. So without further ado, we're going to bring in our guest for today's episode of the Soren Baker Show, Estevan Oriol. Thank you for coming through, sir.
Thank you, brother.
Yes, so Estevan is a world-famous photographer, video director, among many other things, but my introduction to him was in a different capacity and under a different name. So when I met Estevan, he was DJ Scanless, who was touring with and the DJ for Cypress Hill. And I first met him in Indianapolis because I was writing in college. This was around the Temples of Boom era, the third Cypress Hill album. And, you know, the people from the label were like, oh, when you get to the venue, just ask for Scanless, and then he'll hook it up so you can talk to the group. And at that time, you know, this is pre-social media, pre-everything. I didn't know that Muggs wasn't touring with Cypress Hill. So that was shocking. And then, you know, I'm meeting you, and then I'm seeing that not only are you coordinating me to interview the group, but then you also are DJing.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get to all of that story, we need to establish a lot more of your history, because Estevan has taken a lot of the iconic photos of West Coast artists that are on T-shirts, that are in books, including This is Los Angeles, and then his LA Portraits book, both of which are available worldwide. So make sure to pick those up if you haven't already, or if you haven't bought the T-shirts. And he had the Joker clothing line. He's got so many things that he's done and directed a lot of videos that you guys from some of your favorite artists know. But before all that stuff, your father was also a photographer.
Yeah, he was a photographer in like the 80s, and he kind of put it down like in the 90s and started doing painting. And at that time, I was into lowriding, and I'd started working with House of Pain as a tour manager.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, you know, my wife has this extra camera, you know, we want to shoot it to you to have you document the kind of lifestyle you're in. And I was like what? He goes, you know, shooting the lowriders and then shooting these bands and stuff while you're on tour and all the places you're going.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it sounded kind of weird because I didn't really like, you know, cameras and stuff, but I took it anyways and thought, you know, what could it hurt? And took it on tour with me and took it into East LA where my car club was and started taking pictures, and it was on from there.
So House of Pain, obviously, Everlast is the front man and main member of House of Pain. So I know you also were doing bouncing and stuff at clubs and different things. Did you know Everlast when he was with Rhyme Syndicate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when I met Everlast first, when I was working at the clubs. That's pretty much where I met everybody in the music game, and, you know, the celebrities too, is working the door at all the clubs back then.
And which ones were you working at?
I had a club that I worked with Mike Messick's downtown. It was called Hang 10.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty much a hip-hop club. Then we had kind of the cool scene clubs with Brent Bolthouse, which was Papa Willie, Opus Lily. My friend Sean Morrison, rest in peace, he had a after-hours club called The Last Shot. And there was a couple other big clubs that I worked at here and there. I worked at the bar, the Burgundy Room on Cahuenga. And, you know, I was kind of like, it's kind of like a freelance job, so you just work with whoever hires you, and if people have special nights, you'll work on those special nights. And so there was a lot I was looking through the flyers, like, Marcus Wyatt and Orlando and them had a club, Brass, I want to say Brass Knuckles. It wasn't, it was Brass something. I forget being from Cypress Hill, you forgot
Been
a
around
couple
a few
things.
things.
Yeah. So it might have been just called Brass, but it was a club they had on Melrose, and the flyers were Keith Haring artwork.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I have about like 30 flyers of different clubs I worked at in the little folder back at the pad. So I was kind of tripping on that the other day.
And what made you get into that line of work? And what years is this approximately?
This was in the late 80s.
Okay.
And all the way till 92 was when I met Muggs at the clubs in Hollywood. So that was in 89. He took me down to Cypress Ave. That's where I met B-Real and Sen.
And was he still in 783 at the time? Or was that over?
I think
it was about to be
over. It was like, coming to an end because Muggs had given me the demo tape, like the album, but it was on a cassette with his writing. And I still have it, but I never let nobody copy it or anything. It was like a trust and a loyalty thing. Whereas now it would have just been like molested by everybody, but at that time I had the cassette tape and people would be like, hey, let me copy that. Like, nah, if you want to hear it, you can hear it in my ride. That's it. And kicking it with Muggs all those years. And in 92, he said, hey, homie, I want you to, I want to hire you to do this job. And I said, what is it? And he's road managing. And I was like, okay, cool. He goes, it's not for us. It's for another group I got coming out, these white boy rappers. And I was like, oh, okay. I was kind of like a little bit like, I thought I was going to work with Cypress Hill. And then he's like, no, it's these other white boy rappers. And I was like, he goes, but they're cool, And I was like, all right. Because at that time there was like Third Base and Vanilla Ice.
That was about it.
I didn't know, which way I was going to go, And then he was like, it's Everlast. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah, let's do it. And because I had known Everlast from working at the clubs. And he's all, let's go eat dinner, me, you, and Everlast. And that's what happened. And I got the job. And at first it wasn't for no pay. It was just expenses. So I asked Brent and them, the guys I work with the clubs, hey, if I go on this opportunity that I have, could I come back and have my job if it doesn't work out?
Right.
And I asked the guy that I did construction with during the days the same thing, and both of them said, yeah, we'd always have you back. So I ended up going, and we did like college promo tours, and then Jump Around took off. And they started making money, and then they were flowing me money from the shows. It got into be, a weekly check, and it took off from there. And I learned everything about road managing or tour managing hands-on because I had never experienced any type of work like that before. So it was, the way Muggs described it was, you just get them to the shows on time, get them to the interviews on time, check them into the hotels, make sure they get on their flights and everything is cool. And then what it turned into was setting up the travel, setting up the flights, the hotels, checking. You do these like pre-show checks where you fax in the equipment list and the rider to each venue, and you count in all the merchandise before the show. Whatever they sell, you count it out. Setting up all the interviews, making sure all the equipment is there and it leaves at each show, and collecting the money, and then doing the accounting for the tour. So I had to pay everybody their per diems, pay the bus driver, and get all the receipts. It was just like way crazier than it ever sounded like in the beginning, but I learned a lot from it. I learned about, how to treat people and when you're successful and how not to. How to do the merchandise thing, because we started doing clothing around the same time. So I learned about that because, the merchandise companies, I learned, Like basically when you're doing a merch thing with a group and they have an outside company doing their merch, their whole thing is do the cheapest thing, sell it for the most, and
Right.
and you'd get a black shirt and hold it up and you could see through it, and to me I was like, man, I want a thicker shirt, and I didn't want the cheap shit, so I learned all that kind of stuff working with them. And
they had a good logo too.
Yeah.
The House of Pain did.
House of Pain's logo was sick. Danny Boy did that one. And then
so before even all this is happening, how and why do you think Muggs took to you? Like, what was it about you, or what was it about Muggs that made him entrust you like that?
Well, we were friends at that point, and then he saw how I handled myself at the clubs. Like, I was always respectful with everybody, but I wasn't a punk, so people would come up and I'd treat them with respect, but if they didn't treat me with respect, then I wouldn't treat them with respect. And that's in LA, that's a fine line you have to walk, because everybody will put you to the test.
Right.
So if you act a certain way, and people will test you, and then if you're not with that, it's over. So he would see that, that people couldn't, manipulate me to, do what they wanted me to do. So he was like, I like this guy, he's got respect, he has class, and he's down.
Okay. And then with Everlast, when you were first meeting him or getting to know him, did he have the long, slick back hair, or had he shaved his head at that point?
I think he might have shaved his head. But when I first met him, he had the slick back hair.
Yeah, because one of the things that I always think is really interesting is that people forget how many people Ice-T really helped bring through the door, and the significance of those people. Everlast being one of them, D.O.C being another one, Ice-T himself, of course, Divine Styler. There's so many people.
And G. Evil E.
DJ Aladdin.
DJ Aladdin.
It's the list is long and impressive when you look at what they did, and I think a lot of people don't look, for whatever reason, they don't look at him as this talent scout / mogul, King T. He was under Rhyme Syndicate, Lord Finesse.
Islam.
Yeah. So there's so many people that Ice-T directly, had his hands on or had, a big part of launching their careers and then sustaining those careers. So that's kind of why I was curious, because Everlast, with the Rhyme Syndicate Coming Through compilation, he stood out on that, and then his solo album didn't do well, but then obviously he ended up being one of the biggest, being in one of the biggest groups and having one of the biggest songs in rap history.
Yeah, ever. And then he went on to picking up a guitar and winning a Grammy.
Yeah, being a folk singer /
I just did his video yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. His next video called Smoking and Drinking.
Okay.
I shot that yesterday, directed it, and that'll be done in about a week. So,
okay.
We're still homies and all, still Soul Assassins, and, still hooking each other up with, opportunities here and there.
Right. Yeah.
Which is cool, I mean, we're talking about 1989 that we, first started working together and linking up.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are 30 years later, still doing it.
So what was it about you that made you look at this road manager thing as such an opportunity, whereas a lot of people, I think, would have gotten frustrated either by not getting paid or by having this avalanche of responsibility and not having any experience doing it, not knowing about it, kind of it just being dumped on them? Why do you think you looked at it as, what it was a great opportunity?
Yeah, I always been like a hustler, so I always thought like, I always been a hustler, and I always went with the flow and took chances. I thought like, the first thing when they said, oh, you're not going to get paid, I was like, man, I'm going to leave 2 jobs to go to a job that doesn't pay you, like, how smart is that? How much sense does that make? But then I thought, what if I take the risk and I do this and it blows up and I do good, And I kind of thought, since Muggs was putting so much into it, and he was, Cypress was already doing really good at that time, and I heard the record and it was dope, I was like, man, there's kind of no chance that this will fail.
Right.
And I was like, because at that time the crew was really hot. Everybody in our circle was like, everybody was, was flourishing at that point. And so I was like, man, I don't think this can fail. So I just packed a bag and went for it. And by the end of the summer, it was on and cracking. We did a tour with Beastie Boys, and we had a 7-minute set. It was the intro, and then it went into Jump Around. And just that 7 minutes was all, had everybody going off, and which is crazy. If you go to a show, the first band, people are like, coming and sitting down, and they're not really into the first group, but you come in, and the first group of the day plays Jump Around, and the whole crowd is going buck wild. It's like kind of cool to see.
So was that the Check Your Head album it would have been for the Beastie Boys, probably?
I believe so.
Okay. Yep. With Sabotage and So What You Want, that, okay.
And B Real was on the remix of So What You Want.
Mm-hmm. That's big, man. That's big.
Yeah.
So were you able to pick up anything right or wrong to do from being around the Beastie Boys?
No. I didn't really pay attention to them because our movement was, of course I paid attention to them because they were legends. The first show I went to them was in 1984 as Beastie Boys were opening up for Madonna. And I don't think they had even started doing hip-hop yet. They were more on the punk rock tip. So I had respect, for them, and we were like 8 years later. And right. They were already, doing the hip-hop thing. So I had seen them go from punk rock to hip-hop, and they were, opening for Madonna at that time, which was already huge. So I already had a lot of respect for them. So I was more focused on our movement growing and getting bigger, like, daily. So I didn't really watch what they were doing too much. I just was watching our crew. And they were pretty much at the level. They were already at the top, So we weren't really near them too much because, they're already a huge band. And so it's kind of like, their people had them, to this, like when you're on the tour, there's like the main band is on one side of the stage, backstage, and the other bands are on the other side. So you don't really see each other too much. You do when you're going in and off stage, like, hey, what's up? Hey, what's up, guys? How's it going today? But it's not too much like kicking it unless you're all together on the other side, Yeah,
I think a lot of people have misperception that if you're touring together, you spend a lot of time together.
Oh yeah,
it's usually not that way.
It's never like that, really. It was with on the Smoking Grooves tours with Cypress Hill, and it was like that with Cypress and Limp Bizkit on the Napster tour. Like, we all kicked it real tough, and that was a lot of fun. It was wild.
Yeah, I went to a couple of the Smoking Grooves. The one you're talking about, I think, in '96, and that would have been like with the Fugees, Cypress Hill. I remember Call of the Wild was on that.
Yeah, Tribe Called Quest, Busta Rhymes.
It was amazing, man.
It was off the chain.
I went to the one in Atlanta, and I'll never forget. I was with Beast Move, Call of the Wild, and talked a lot with Fife that day. But it was just an amazing tour, an amazing thing to behold, and that's something that we don't have that much in rap anymore, where you have so many different artists of different styles touring together and all delivering an amazing show.
And back then, everything was like, you went to a live show, you saw it live.
Right.
Like, I remember we were somewhere in Busta Rhymes came on, and at that time he had I forget what song it was, but everybody went berserk, and they were going so wild on stage that I think Busta Rhymes might have jumped off of the the DJ stand onto the stage at one point, and when he hit the stage, it skipped the record.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, hold up, and the DJ had to catch it, put the needle back to where it was and start over again. And if that was now, you would hear the track keep going and the lyrics would keep going, which blows me away. Like,
right.
Back then we had a group called Milli Vanilli, and basically it was like karaoke.
Right.
And people shit on them. They're like, they don't sing their own music. They don't sing it live. And then Jessica Simpson, I think her sister.
Ashley Simpson, yep.
Yeah, Ashley Simpson came out like lip syncing or whatever over her tracks on a TV show or something like that. And everybody went crazy on her. But now every rapper does that. They sing over their lyrics, like, you can see them, like, put the mic down.
And the song's
still going. And they're hyping the song, and their lyrics are still going. And to me, that's not a live show. You're just...
It's like you're shooting a music video.
You're doing a karaoke or shooting the music video, whereas, you got to give it up to someone like Be Real or Everlast that have, over 5 albums. They're doing an hour and a half to 2 hours of music, and they're remembering every single word of every song they perform, because if they don't, people will talk shit. So they're on their game like so hard, and now it's just like not even like that. You could just put the mic down and be out there dancing, shaking your ass, and everybody will be throwing their hands in the air and dancing and loving the music, and the song and the lyrics are still playing like I guess like on a CD or whatever.
But that's the difference as to why people like Everlast and Cypress Hill in particular are still able to tour the world, and a lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
Because, as you know more than I do, but I mean, Cypress Hill, especially in that era and still today, I haven't seen them in the last couple of years, but they always had an amazing live show, and then add in Bobo with the live percussion.
Yeah.
Added extra dimensions to it, and then but Cypress, that, as you know, that's one of the reasons that they became so popular, because they did good shows and they were willing to tour, and they did Lollapalooza, and they did all these other things that at the time were unconventional, but that's also was unconventional with rap, to be a touring rap group. And they were one of the first ones, I'd say probably after Public Enemy, to really make it that a big staple of what they did was tour.
Yeah, they were game changers and door openers for a lot of things, They're the ones, who kicked the door open with the weed thing.
Absolutely.
And, they rode, we'd get arrested on the stage. We'd go to some shows and the cops would be like, hey, make sure you guys don't light no weed and everything will be cool. Yeah, no problem. Don't worry, we got this. The song would come on, the beat,
I want to
come
get
on,
high.
I want to get higher. Do you want to get high? And B-roll would pop the joint out. Cops would come walking on stage. The crowd would go crazy, like, ready to start a riot. And the cops would, like, get scared because there's only a couple cops and thousands of people, They're like, we got to pick our battles. Do we want a riot here or do we let the guy smoke a joint?
Right.
And that was, some of the stuff that we were going through in the early 90s. Muggs lit a joint on Saturday Night Live. They got banned for life. Whereas now, it's legal. You can walk around the street smoking weed.
Right.
They have new spots opening up that you can smoke weed in, which to me should be like that. If they have cigar lounges and places where people can smoke cigarettes, then why wouldn't they let somebody smoke some weed? It's not PCP or nothing,
Right. Not a sherm stick.
Yeah.
So that being said, with Muggs in particular, what happened to where he decided not to tour and then you ended up being Cypress Hill's tour DJ?
I would say he started getting some big offers from people to do remixes.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time in the business, you could get paid a lot doing a remix. And he was doing remixes for like Janet Jackson and some other big people, and I want to say George Michael or one of them, or some huge stars at that time he was doing remixes for. And the amount of money you could make from doing that one remix is what he'd make doing a whole tour.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, touring was fun and all that, but it is kind of grueling, and you're with, you know, anywhere from 7 guys to 13 guys on a bus. And, you know, there's guys sleeping on the couches, and in the tour buses there's bunk beds, so there was like 12 bunk beds. And then there's a room in the back and a room in the front, lounges. So, you know, it's tight quarters, and you have to be really cool with people and all that to be able to live that way, you know. 7 or 13 men
right
on one little ass bus, you know. It's like a 1-bedroom apartment.
And then had you been DJing all along, or is this something you had to pick up, like, hey, next week I need you to be the DJ? Like, what happened?
No, I DJ'd some after hours clubs, you know, here in LA with Sean Mortensen and them.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I would work the door at a club, and then they're like, hey, you know, you want to come and spin at an after hours club after this? I go, yeah, sure. And then I used to roll around with Mike Messick, and we would go DJing bar mitzvahs, weddings, and, you know, all kinds of stuff. So I knew how to do it and all that. So it wasn't like, you know, okay, just do this and do that. You know, it's just like, hey, can you do the DJ? And at first we used to have a DAT player, and we'd have to do like live scratching. And then we did a radio show, the Soul Assassins Radio at KMEL.
Right.
Me, B-Real, Cartoon, DJ TRT passed away recently, and Bobo. And we caught on to using these instant replays. And so then we ended up putting all the songs on the instant replay and using that for the show music, and then scratching live. So because some of the clubs we'd go to, it'd be really humid, and the DAT player would freeze up. And then you're asked out. You know, the show's kind of done, because, like I said, if you're using the records and anybody jumps around,
right,
the record jumps to the next song, and it's like messes up the show. So we started using the instant replay, doing the live shows, and it was perfect. It's a perfect like thing to keep the music at a steady pace. But you know, they were like, you know, the whole show's on the instant replay, and you know, you could easily, like, that stress of messing up the whole show. You're the guy, even if you're pushing buttons,
right,
you're the guy that could mess up the whole show. So that's kind of stressful, you know. And that's what it was, you know.
So how did was it touring or something else that got your bond with the rest of Cypress?
Definitely it was the touring, you know.
Okay.
My first show with them was, I mean, we were all friends, like I said, in 89, and up until 92 to 93, 94 is when I was working with House of Pain, which we did the Soul Assassin tour and other tours, and we were all family. But then in 94, my first show with Cypress was Woodstock 94. So from then on to 2005, you know, we're like brothers, you know,
right,
rolling with each other every day, all day. And, you know, that we had that like brotherly bond until, you know, to this day.
Mm-hmm. And then as this is going on, of course, you're documenting it as a photographer as well. So when did that really click with you that, hey, I'm doing something special?
I would say after the mid-90s,
okay,
I would say is when I started realizing that I was doing something that not too many people were doing. I was noticing that I was the only guy on the tour with the camera. You know, people, like a real camera. Other people had throwaway cameras or disposable cameras, but I was the only guy with a camera the whole time, except for when we'd pull up into a city and people were doing interviews and photo shoots. Other than that, nobody was really walking around with a camera. So that's how I kind of got my little hustle on with the photos, is because when we were doing interviews, I noticed that the press people wouldn't really get too much time to do photos because the interviewer would take up the 15 minutes. Because I had say I had 4 interviews a day for the band. I'd give everybody 15 minutes. We do an hour and, go do sound check or go eat dinner. So for each 15 minutes, maybe the writer would take up 10, 12, 13 minutes, and the photographer would have 2 or 3 minutes to do enough photos for a 10-page spread.
Right.
And it never would work. So I started pitching my photos to the magazines, hey, if you guys need backstage or live shots of them, I got you. And at first you could tell people were like, oh, here, look at the roadie, he's over here offering his little snapshots. And then I would show them the pictures. They're like, man, you shoot these? I go, yeah. And when I'd see the reaction, I kind of knew well, maybe I do have something here, because I was just offering being nice. And then when I realized that I had something, that's when I turned it into a little hustle. And I was asking them, hey, who are you interviewing today? And they'd say, oh, we're doing Busta Rhymes and we're doing the Fugees. And I go, I got, shots of them too backstage and live if you want. So I would kind of work that angle, And then I started noticing man, I should shoot all the bands that we tour with and see who needs these photos. Because they would offer anywhere from $250 to $500 a photo for the usage. But if you get a couple of those photos in that article, it adds up. So that was one of my little hustles.
And what were some of the first places you remember getting published in that way?
Just different music and lifestyle magazines. My first magazine that we had a steady thing, me and Cartoon, we had a 2-page thing in a magazine called Fine in Japan. And we did a lowrider, a little lowrider section. It was called Low Life, for lowrider lifestyle. And every month we would send them, maybe 10 different shots, and Cartoon would draw around the photos, and we'd send that to them, on a board with my photos and then the drawings on the board. So it's kind of prehistoric if you look at it now, because most people would just send an email and some JPEGs or whatever, but we'd send the actual photo prints and a board with the drawings on them. And then I started shooting for different magazines, and I started in I think 98 I did my first job with Rap Pages, which was Snoop Dogg. It was a cover and 10 pages on the inside.
That was my article.
There it goes. So
it was, I remember that well, because that was for the No Limit Top Dog album, and that was when he had his braids.
Yep.
And it was a green background on the cover, I think.
Well, there's a thing. The editor wanted me to go shoot it, and then when I brought the pictures back, they're like, hey, there's nothing, for the cover here. So I'm going to shoot him for the cover. I was like, yeah, whatever,
Oh,
I'd already got
That was for Lumumba, I think.
Yeah, I'd already got the budget and done my photos that I wanted, so it didn't really matter, I was still getting the 10 pages on the inside, so I didn't really care. I was like, whatever, But I had plenty of pictures for the cover if you wanted some real street shit, But they wanted the studio light with the background, like in a studio.
It's coming back to me. I remember this all happening because there was one of my favorites was when you had the picture of them playing video games with him with Cypress, I think.
Yeah, it was, I took B-Real with me, and it was at Encore Studio, and Snoop was there, Dre, Daz and Nate Dogg, rest in peace, was there. And they're all playing a game in the room. But what I noticed, because I was a daylight shooter, I use natural light. Right. So I was like, man, it's dark in here. There's nowhere I could really shoot. I told Snoop, is it cool if we shoot outside? He goes, yeah, whatever you want. So I went outside and looked around, and I saw the alley in the background. There was a big brick wall. I shot him there. And then there was another wall down the street that had like this old messed up like white plywood. And there was a sign on there, black sign with white letters, said "Beware the dog." And I was like, "Man, right here, this is it." So I had him crouched down low on the right side, and the "Beware the dog" was on the upper left-hand corner. And I was like, "That's the shot right there." And to this day, that's in the book. This is Los Angeles, so
yeah, that's one of our early collaborations. Because I remember when that interview was happening, shout out to Alan Gordon he did 8-Ball and MJG, and I did Snoop, because we had a last minute need for a cover, and both of us are still huge fans of both of those, Snoop and 8-Ball and MJG, but Alan just ended up doing 8-Ball and MJG, and I ended up doing the Snoop. And then I remember the photos very well, and I was, as doing a cover story back then was a big deal, and to have your photos on the cover story was also, a really big deal. So I have my own experiences on a very different level, not from being from LA and, not being from here, but also not being of like the hood culture from out here. But for you, what did you notice being around so many different neighborhoods, backgrounds, people, that enables you to kind of navigate those worlds so well?
Well, I'm born and raised from LA, so it was nothing for me. It was like just another day in LA. But like on that thing, me and B, we kicked it pretty much every day. So I go, "Hey B, I'm going to shoot Snoop. You want to roll?" He's like, "Yeah, let's go." So we went there, and of course he knew everybody, and I probably knew most of the people, but probably Dre I didn't know, but I had known the rest of the guys. So we rolled up in there. They all smoked a joint, played the game, and then I went out, shot. I brought Snoop a box of Joker, because everybody that I would shoot, I'd bring our clothing brand Joker at that time, so I'd just bring them as a gift. I was like, "Hey homie, I got you this box if you want." He's like, "Yeah." And then he's like, "Oh, this shit is dope, let me can I wear some of it in the photos?" I go, "Hell yeah." So he put on the East Sider sweatshirt,
right,
and that was it. I was like, "Damn, this is cool." Like the first time I come and meet the homie, and he throws on our clothing brand and busts it out in the photo shoot. And I was like, "Man, what more could you ask for, So if you're getting that at that level, that kind of respect at that level, it's just like makes it so much easier. You're just like, you just learn like, how to navigate through basically through through people. But the one thing, as long as you're rolling with respect, you always will get that kind of love back, I noticed that I noticed I watch other people, and when they would roll up there like cocky or whatever, people would just shut them down, or it'd be a confrontation.
Right.
So I was like, okay, you just roll in there respectfully, and everybody's cool.
Right.
And I've seen what happens when you don't,
So have I.
And even people, they came at me like that, like I went to do a photo shoot one time for a magazine, and these two guys were like 4 hours late, and I was like, "Man, I'm out of here," And the magazine called me, and they go, "Hey, where are you going?" The manager or publicist is calling saying you're not there. I go, "Well, what do you want me to do? How long am I supposed to wait for these guys? I'm not an idiot, And they go, oh, they were stuck in traffic because it's basketball weekend or whatever that is, where they have the All-Star weekend.
Right.
And I was like, that's cool, I'm here. I don't care about all that, Right. So I left, and then they came back, and they got there like 15 minutes after I left, and they were like, hey, where is this guy? But if I'm sitting there waiting, and I get frustrated and leave, and then you get there 10 minutes later asking me like, where are you at? It's like, to me, I was disrespectful,
right,
that they were late. But because they're big shot stars, they thought it was, they don't got to pay no respect to me, because what am I, just a photographer, They're like, hey, we're the big shot stars. He's just a photographer. We don't care. We'll show up when we feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's like, I got shit to do too, So I left, and then the magazine called. I went back, and right when I got there, the guy started talking shit like, hey, man, we're not from here. We came out here, and, you're supposed to do this photo shoot with us, and you ain't even here. And I was like, once they came at me crazy like that, I was like, I'm out of here. And they go, what do you mean? Hey, where are you going? I go, I don't need to put up with this shit, I don't give a fuck who you are. Like, if you're not cool to me and respectful with me, then I don't need to work with you,
Right.
But the money ain't even all that, It's about the respect. If they think they can shit on you just because they're sold some records, like, fuck that, So I boned out, and the magazine was like, please go back, take pictures of them. I went back and took pictures of them. The manager told, hey, tell them you're sorry, So it felt kind of cool, like, that they had to humble themselves and apologize and all that. And then we did the photos, and I was gone. But it's kind of, to me, all I've learned is if you are respectful with people, they'll be respectful back.
Right. It's a very simple but a very difficult lesson for people to apply for some reason.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's really weird. I've never understood why people that totally disrespect people all the time expect to be respected.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you treat
strange.
people like shit, and you want them to worship you. Like, that shit don't make no sense.
Right. So you mentioned Joker and cartoon, so let's get into that for a minute. So you, as being a hustler, you also have a lot of entrepreneurialism with you. So how and why did Joker seem to be a good thing to do when you did it?
Because we had, I met Cartoon in 1992.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine, Donnie Charles, rest in peace. He was a lowrider. I met him through the club world to get, another guy I met through the clubs in Hollywood. And he was also in the music industry and lowrider, during the day. So, we met up and we got along real good and started hanging out. And he's like, hey, I'm going to this party tonight for Penthouse Players. If you want to go, let's roll.
Penthouse Players Click?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went to it. It was at the Hollywood Athletic Club. And at that time, if you went to a hip hop event, it was mostly, blacks,
Mm-hmm.
There was a few Mexicans and a few Latinos and a few whites that were at these functions. So when you'd walk into these events, you could see them, right off the bat. So right when we walked in, Donnie looked to the left and he goes, hey, there's my other homie, Cartoon. He's another Mexican fool and he likes low riding, come over here and I'll introduce you. So went over there and started hanging out with him. Told him, hey, I just got back from Japan. I'm working with this group called House of Pain. Here's a sampler tape. He's like, oh, I'm going to Japan to do some murals on some lowriders. And, then we talked about the lowriding and the music, and we started kicking it, tough after that. After that, he went to Japan and came back, and I went on tour and came back, and then we were hanging out and just ended up doing a bunch of shit after that. And one of the things was I was doing work in the Hollywood Hills doing construction on this guy's house that owned some stores on Melrose, and he wanted to do a clothing store, kind of like hip hop and LA street culture. So he hit up my boy Lucky, who I got a job at the, doing the construction with me. He's like, hey man, would you want to do a store on Melrose with me with the whole Chicano thing? And he's like, yeah, for sure. And I was going on tour, so I hooked him up with Cartoon to do the artwork, and they opened it up. It was called Supermax. And I brought him, I got the merch from House of Pain and Cypress Hill in the store. And then they had Dickies and Nikes and Levi's, and it was just like a cool little vibe in there. And then he started tripping, the store owner. So we were like, fuck it, we're out of here. So the store closed down. And then me and Lucky started a company called Not Guilty. He went to prison. I kept the company going. And then this lady did the trademark thing and shut us down. She had this acid wash jean company with the trademark Not Guilty and shut us down. So then we turned those designs into Scanless, and that got shut down by another company that had the trademark. And then Cartoon was doing Joker with another guy, and they kind of fell out on the company. And so they had all this inventory, and I told B, I go, hey, B, if, what do you think about getting all the inventory from the homies, and we do Joker? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So we bought all the inventory and started doing Joker clothing and took it on the road and blew it up. And we'd wear it at all the shows and in all the interviews, and it was perfect timing. So at that time, there was really no place for us for our kind of clothing. It was there was the surfers had their stuff. There was the hip hop guys had their stuff. They called it urban wear, and then there was us. It was kind of like a Chicano clothing company. So we were like, there was no place for us really. So we ended up going into the urban section of clothing, like at the magic shows and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But now if you look at it, it's like, we're probably the first streetwear company. Mm-hmm. Because our stuff didn't go with the FUBUs and the cross colors and Carl Kanai, and it didn't really fit in with the Billabongs and the OPs and the Quicksilvers.
Right.
So kind of kicked off like a whole style, a new style. We had like different artwork. We had lowriders on our clothes. We had tattoo artwork on our clothes, and we did pretty good. We kind of had like a negative thing on us because we were coming from a different place. Like people couldn't wear our clothes at school. They get kicked out of school, and our sales reps were calling us going, hey man, your clothes are getting stolen out of stores. And I go, okay, well, that's a bad thing or what? And he was like, yeah. The customers are kind of tripping out that out of all the brands, your shit is getting stolen. And I go, to me, that's like, that's kind of crazy, Like people are willing to give up 3 years of their life in prison, stealing something. That's how bad they want it.
Right.
Like to me, you got to look at the positive stuff. And there's like, yeah, well, and then, it's getting banned from this school and that school. I was like, man, we're kind of getting the door shut on us everywhere we were going. And we just stuck it out until it started getting accepted. And
what were some of the biggest accounts you guys had, retail-wise?
I'm not sure really. I can't even remember the names of the stores, but our biggest thing was being distributed in other countries. That's where you get the big orders. Like if a German distributor would order, $100,000 worth of clothes, or a Japanese distributor, like that's when you're hitting, because we were basically getting into boutiques.
Right.
and like street shops. And at that time, like you said, like entrepreneurism was blowing up like crazy. Like the lowrider world, people were buying cars and selling them, and buying car parts and selling them. So like now they're entrepreneurs, international entrepreneurs, because they're buying cars and car parts and shipping them to other countries, and then we're making clothes and shipping it to international, customers. And it just was going crazy at that time in the 90s. So what would you
Just
ask?
some of the accounts that you were in.
Yeah.
But overseas is where it was at.
Yeah, overseas for us was big.
But
I'd say at the end, the biggest was like Ross, because like everybody would sell out their closeouts to Ross, like all the big brands, like FUBU, Fat Farm, Rockaware,
right.
Sean John. Everybody was selling their last seasons to Ross, and then it would get, but it was like discounted.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that wasn't like, my goal was to sell discount clothing. I wanted to sell it, at the regular price, and get the most for all the work we were putting into it.
Right.
But the clothing game was really hard back then, and now it's even harder because there's no stores.
I was about to say, now it's all Amazon basically.
Yeah, everything's online
and custom. So with all of this, you're still obviously doing your photography, but then of course you also, as you had mentioned earlier, directing with Everlast, but you started directing a lot of videos at the same time.
Yeah.
So how and why did that happen?
A guy named Martin, he passed away. Also, he gave me a Super 8mm camera, or 8mm camera, and he's like, "Hey man, I really love the way your photos come out. It'd be cool to see your photos like moving, like a live image of your photos." And he was like, "Check this camera out." And he gave me this 8mm camera. And I was like, "All right, cool, whatever." And so I'd take it out, I'd do my photo shoots, and then I'd pick up the 8mm and I'd shoot a couple seconds or a couple minutes of those photo shoots. And then I used to take them to this place, and they would develop that film and transfer it to VHSs. And I was watching the VHS, and because there's no sound on the 8mm, I would put like hip hop to it, or oldies, or some kind of music I was into, and just watch the footage. And I was like, man, this is pretty cool. And then it came time to where we were supposed to, B-Real and them needed a video, and I showed them some footage and played it. I go, "Hey, check this footage out and listen to it to the music." And they're like, "Fuck, that's cool, we should make that our video." So I said, "Well, tell the label and see what they say. Or tell them you should direct it and I'll shoot it." Because at that time, Dre and Ice Cube were starting to direct their own videos. And B was like, "Nah, I'm cool, I'm the MC, the rapper. I'll do that, and you can do the video directing." I was like, "All right, cool, hook it up with the label." So he told the label, and the label was like, "Well, have him send us his reel." And I was like, "Well, fuck, I never done a video before, so how could I send you my reel?" And they go, "Just send some, some of the footage that you have, and put it to music, and we'll see what they say." So I went tape to tape and rewinded and paused and recorded and rewinded and paused and recorded for like an hour, enough for the 3-minute song. Then I took the song and that VHS tape to a place, and they overlapped it.
Okay.
They synced it up, and I sent them that is the video, and they're like, "Okay, yeah, he got the job." And then those guys are like, "Let's just use that as a video. We don't even need to be in the band, be in the shots." And at that time, the whole thing of music videos was performance,
Right.
having the band in the video. And they were like, "No way, you got to be in the video." So we did the video. They liked it. I did the next one, and the next
What
one.
video was the first one?
Psycho City Blocks.
Okay.
And then I ended up doing the SX10 video for Sendog, and 2 videos for Muggs for the Soul Assassins album, and Green Thumb and Kill a Man in Spanish. So I had about 7 videos on my own, just from Soul Assassins and our crew. And then I went to meet the people at Interscope, and my first video outside of our crew was D12, I'll Shit on You.
And that was a black and white one too?
Yep. Another black and white one shot on all film, and it took off from there. I ended up doing probably 50 music videos to this day. And I'd say my biggest one for sure is Blink-182, Down. That was my biggest budget. And I got a movie agent out of that, which led to meeting Brian Grazer, which led to doing executive producing on this movie Lowriders, and it was all good.
So before we get into the Lowriders film, since you have a wide range of interests, I've always been interested, because I do too, but I always think of Schoolie D. It was like I'm an artist, and I have different things that I do. Like I paint, I draw, I rap, I make beats, I produce. I do have all these different things, and it's not like I like one or care about one more than the other. It's just part of who I am. I'm an artist.
Right.
So is that do you have the same philosophy, or do you look at things differently? Like you go just ride the wave? Like how do you do it? Or how do you think about it?
I definitely think like that, First, I started, I was a hustler, It started out as just me being on my grind, and then I would pretty much never say no to anything.
Okay.
And I would figure it out as I went along. And that's how it's been with pretty much everything. I learned everything on my own. I learned the touring, the tour managing, the DJing, the photography, the video, directing, the clothing, everything I learned, hands-on. I never went to school for any of it, but I love it all, I love directing, I love shooting, I love taking pictures, the music, the fashion, and, that's where you really become an artist, when you can, excel in different parts of art. To me, that's what it feels like. There's a lot of people that consider themselves artists, but, nobody sees their art, or they're not, maybe they're artists, but they're not. To me, if you're a pro, you're getting checks from it.
Right.
To me, that's kind of like determines how good you are. If you're getting a check out of it, then it's something. Otherwise, you're just doing it for yourself in the garage.
Yeah. I mean, people forget this is a popularity contest.
Yeah.
Everything is, especially if you don't just have a normal job. If you're in entertainment or you're trying to be an artist, I've always found it intriguing where people try to argue, well, it's not about, selling or making money or whatever. Well, then if it's not, then stay in your garage or wherever your room.
Yeah, don't show nobody.
Yeah, don't show anybody.
Don't
and just
play nobody your music. Don't show nobody your photos. And, never make enough clothes for anybody else. Just make them for, yourself an outfit. And,
that's it.
If it ain't about the money or a pat on the back or nothing, then, don't do it like that, But for me, if you're an artist, you kind of have like you're kind of like, you want people to pat you on the back for your accomplishments,
Yeah.
Like for me, I love it, when people are like, hey man, I saw this photo, that was so great. It kind of like throws you off, but at the same time, you're like, okay, cool, I'm doing something right. Like I never really like when people are like, hey man, I love your photos. I get kind of like, oh shit, But then at the same time, like, hey, cool, that guy likes my pictures.
Right.
It's kind of like, you feel kind of I don't know, it's not embarrassed, but it's just kind of weird when people tell you, give you compliments.
Right.
And then, but after like a couple of seconds later and they walk away, you're like, hey, that's pretty cool. That guy likes my pictures,
Yeah.
and it's just not any guy it's like everybody, when people come up to you and they're like, hey man, I really like your photos, or I like this t-shirt or whatever. Like, that's a cool feeling.
No, I know. It's still it's amazing to me when people say that stuff about my articles or something that I wrote or produced or directed or whatever.
Yeah.
It is amazing, man. And now that we're, both putting out a lot of books and stuff, that just keeps it going even more. So you got the LA Portraits book, you got This Is Los Angeles book. So for you, your publisher's Italian based, that's correct?
Yeah, it's Drago Publishing. They're from Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And my first book with them was LA Woman.
Mm-hmm.
My second was LA Portraits, and my newest one is This Is Los Angeles. And, I'm loyal to them because they were the ones that took the chance on me. A lot of people, they put out a lot of people's first books. And then, they're a boutique company, and they've done pretty much all the coolest street artists and photographers' first books. And there's other bigger companies that'll hit you up after that. It's kind of like being on an independent label, putting out a record, you get a hit, and then the big labels come.
Right.
It's kind of the same thing with the book world. But to me, I'm like, you guys didn't take the chance on me in the beginning, so I'm cool with my people. And that's Drago, That's
Mm-hmm.
my publisher. I don't have an exclusive deal with them or anything, but out of respect, I always say, this is a book I want to do. What do you guys think? And almost every time they're like, cool, let's do it.
So what are the similar overlapping elements and then the differences in the books, in your opinion?
In the books,
Yeah.
it's the overlapping elements is me and my style.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I shoot it, I shoot it all on film. All the books are on film. They're all predominantly mostly black and white because that's what I like to shoot in. And it's just my style, people brought it up to me. I didn't really notice, but they're like, hey, I always can tell when I see one of your pictures. They're like, that's an Estevan Oriol shot. And I'm like, oh, okay. It kind of throws me back, like I said, but I'm like, hey, that's pretty cool, that they can look at a picture and be like, hey, that's his shot.
And what is it that defines one of your shots, either in your own mind or from what people have told you?
I don't really know, to tell you the honest. I just see, I didn't even know I could take good pictures until I started seeing other people's photos. I said, other homies that would come on tours with us, they'd bring a disposable camera. And we'd show each other our pictures, like, hey, let me see your pictures from the last tour. And, oh, let me see yours. And so when I would see their pictures, I was like, damn, what the fuck, Because I had seen mine already. I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I'd see theirs. I'd be like, what the fuck were they thinking, taking that picture,
Right.
And they'd, be blurry, or the framing was off, or, the people would be, the main subject would be out of focus, but people in the background would be in focus, I was like, man, their pictures aren't so good. And then I started showing my pictures to more people, and they're like, hey, you're pretty good at this. And the photo lab where I take my stuff to, they had worked with all the pros, and the lady in there was like, how come you never blow up your pictures, Because at that time, I had milk crates in the back. I had an 84 Cutlass,
Mm-hmm.
and my office was my trunk. I had all my photos with my contact sheets and the negatives in the back in a milk crate.
Mm.
And I'd put the envelopes in the milk crates, and I have them all, in order, A to Z. I had 2 milk crates in the back of the trunk. And I would just, never blow up the pictures except for maybe the 1-hour photo labs.
Right.
And the lady's like, hey, can I blow up some of your pictures and hang them in here? And I said, sure. And she ended up selling 8 out of the 11 photos. And she's like, I've never sold this many photos of one person, and I've had big names, of big name people on the walls. And she's all, you might want to think about that. And I was like, okay. I go, if this lady that sees the best of the best, and we're in L.A., you know, the home of all this shit, then maybe I should take it more serious.
And I think, too, one of the testaments to your work, in my opinion, is that, granted, you have a lot of photos that you've had and that you've used or that are been famous over the years with celebrities, but in your books, that's not necessarily the driving force. It's, you know, dudes from the street, girls from the street, or just quote unquote, you know, people from the hood or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So that being said, why do you think just your pictures of quote unquote anonymous people or non-famous people, why do you think those have taken on such power with people?
I think it's my eye, you know, the way I captured it, the emotion of the people and their expressions that I captured when I was taking the photos, the access that I had, and you know, my choice of person that I put in the photos. You know, I don't just shoot everybody and anybody, but I think the people that I've chose to photograph caught people's eye, like those people caught my eye.
So how does it work? You're just driving down the street and you see some dudes from a certain neighborhood and you just be like, hey, can I take your picture? Like, how does it work?
Well, it started when I was with the homies and the hood stuff. Me and my homies were doing the car club thing and going to lowrider shows, and I would just see a bunch of fools, you know, tatted up and stuff. I'd be like, hey man, can I get some flicks? You guys, you know, with the tats and all that? And they're like, yeah, whatever. And they would just post up, and I would shoot them either in their hood or by some cars or whatever, wherever we were. And it ended up, you know, the word spread out to where it was like, you know, hey, this is a homie from this neighborhood, that neighborhood, and, you know, you want to, you know, do some flicks of them? I was like, yeah, whatever, you know, and ended up doing, like, I had a lot of different LA hood shit, you know, in my archive, and then magazines would see it, you know, on my website or whatever, because at that time there wasn't really any social media whatsoever.
Right.
And you only went off of a website, and not everybody could have a website even back then. Like, you had to get somebody to design your website and do all the coding in the back,
mm-hmm.
which was crazy. Now you just have templates and you drag and drop photos, right. But back in the day it was really difficult to have a website. And I ended up, you know, bartering with some friends of mine that were website dudes, and I ended up getting a cool little website, and magazines saw it, and they're like, hey, we're doing this special on this kind of, like, I think the Source hit me up to do a photo shoot on a story they were doing on Bloods and Crips of LA. And they sent me around to a bunch of different neighborhoods and to shoot, and then FHM hit me up one time to do the story on the Rolling 20s Bloods. And I went out and did that. And those, because FHM was a franchise, they were in, like, you know, 30 or 50 different countries. All those countries would, I don't know how it worked, but it seemed kind of like there was like a Dropbox for whatever photos or articles they had. Okay. And then other countries would, you know, say, oh, I want that story in our country. And I think that story on that I did of those guys went to like maybe 10 different magazines, 10 different FHMs, like 10 different countries. So then, you know, now it's getting out there in different parts of the world and different magazines, and people would shoot me an email on my website and be like, hey, is it cool if we run the story and run your pictures in the story? I'd be like, yeah. And it kind of went, one was, you know, people just talking in the street, and the other one was through the magazines. Okay. It kind of went two ways. Word of mouth, and then, you know, in the magazine world.
All right. So your photos have also been, in a lot of exhibits and stuff, including the Contact High here in Los Angeles. So what do you get out of it being in a exhibit that's different than a book or in a magazine or even a video?
You get eyes, people walking up. Some of the shows I've been on in these museums have gotten 150,000 people attending. So that's 150,000 people that are walking by an actual photograph that you took and looking at it and, spending time in front of it. And then the whole phone era came through to where people were taking photos of them and posting them. And then the social media came, and it was, it just blows up when 150,000 people are coming through, seeing your photos, and maybe just say 20,000 of them take a photo of your photo and post it on their stuff, and it's just out there,
Gotcha.
So to this date, I've been in 15 museums and done maybe 50 art galleries around the world. And that's, it's kind of like touring. For a record, you're kind of like touring your work. I kind of like look everything at the way everything I learned from touring with Cypress Hill and House of Pain is how I approach my work, like my books. I push my books like they push their records. I do the promo tours. I do art shows, kind of like how they do concerts. I kind of parallel it with what I learned from those guys, and I act the way I saw them act at work. Like the way Be Real would be cool to like everybody that came up to him and said, "Hey man, can I get a picture or sign something for me?" Or, "I love your music." I saw the way he would treat everybody, and I was like, man, if I ever was in this kind of position, that's how I would do it. And because I've seen other acts or other artists that didn't act like that, and it hurts them,
Absolutely.
physically and, in their pocket. Like a fan could turn on you in a second. You don't act a certain way, the way the fan expects you to act or wants you to act. They're just bad, man, fuck that dude. He didn't talk to me long enough, or he didn't take enough pictures with me, or he didn't
Well, it's back to, like you said, the respect, though.
Yeah.
You got to respect.
But some
your
of them
fans.
are some people are a little weird,
That I know, yes.
So, sometimes you're like, hey, come on, bro, like, chill out, like going a little too far.
Right.
There's reasons why Cube would say, shake my hand, make it a firm shake, and, say what's up, and then break, like, because some of them get a little carried away.
They want to have a 20-minute conversation.
Yeah, they just want to rap in your ear, and they're drunk. I've seen it all being on tour, People are like, hey, man, I'm rapping too, and they're all faded and just fucking spitting while they're talking and trying to freestyle in your ear with no beat, and you're not hearing what they're hearing in their head, You're just hearing a drunk motherfucker, spitting all over you while he's, all faded and shit. But, it's kind of you don't know nobody, and you're in their cities and stuff, and you kind of like, go through these crazy ass experiences with all these people that you never met before.
Right.
But you have to do it to, get your work out there. Like,
which you've been very successful at doing.
Yeah.
So what should people be looking out for you for now?
Right now I have the Contact High, I have some pieces at the Contact High show at the Annenberg Space of Photography. And I have the book that just came out. This is Los Angeles. And in New York, I'm part of a big show there called Beyond the Streets by Roger Gassman. And those are like pretty much three of my biggest things that are out right now.
Okay.
We got a documentary coming out in the beginning of next year called LA Originals. And that's pretty much taking up most of my time right now. Other than a few little group shows I'm with, or, I'm doing my merch, or, little, the little jobs that come through to keep it moving,
Right.
Like I said, I just did Everlast's next video, smoking and drinking. So it's, staying active and staying relevant and being as good as your last, like they say, you're only as good as your last record. Well, I do that with the, the photos, the videos, the clothing, everything.
Right.
So it's just, always trying to either stay at the same level or push yourself to the next level, but it's a thin line.
Right. And then what's the best way for them to find you now? A social media, web, whatever?
Pretty much my website is always easy, EstevanOriol.com, or my Instagram is Estevan Oriol. The same with the Facebook and all that. I pretty much have everything nice and simple for everybody.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, because I always ask people, hey, what's your Instagram? It's like 12_ blue_ some other shit. I'm like, what the fuck is all that?
Right.
Just put your name. It's so easy. I like when Mike Jones came out. He's like, and Paul Wall, they just came out with their own name, and it's just so easy. It
makes it simple.
Yeah.
Well, there it is, y'all. Well, thanks, Stefan, for coming through, man. It's always great talking with you.
That's it? We're done?
Yeah, man. For this episode, we'll have to have you come back, because there's a lot of other stuff, obviously, we could, should, and need to talk about. But I'm glad you were able to make it through. And, yeah, man, it's just crazy.
Yeah, we go way back.
Yeah, seeing all your success and all the different things, because that's... I was asking you about the entrepreneurialism, because that's, I've never been a DJ or anything, but I've done so many different things, and people always seem so surprised.
Yeah.
But that's just how I think.
I had a lot of successful friends that were like big shots in companies, and they're like, you're doing too much. You're spreading yourself out too thin. I go, okay, well, should I quit tour managing? My main source of income? And they're like, well, no, that'd be stupid. Well, should I quit photography? And then, no, you're great at it. Well, should I quit videos? No, I mean, you're taking off. Should I quit doing the clothing? Well, no, you guys are, you're Joker brand. How can you quit that? I'm like, well, what the fuck are you talking about then? I'm doing all these different things, but I'm focused on all of them. So I'm not like, it's when you start losing focus on one thing, that's when it starts falling
when
or
the product
failing.
Suffers.
Yeah. So as long as you give everything enough attention, it'll be okay, And they couldn't understand that, because they only had one type of job. They went there from 9 to 5, and they got pretty good checks from that. But I wasn't that guy. I couldn't do that type of work, or didn't want to.
Right.
This is, I wanted to do a bunch of different things, and whatever came in from whatever source of, work I was doing, and as long as I was paying my bills, I was cool.
Well, congratulations on the success, man.
Well,
and
thank
continued.
You. Yep.
So there it is, y'all. We'll catch you next time on the Soren Baker Show here on the Digital Soapbox Network and on Unique Access. Thanks again to Estevan Oriol for coming through, and we'll catch you guys next time. Soren Baker Show.
Thank you, Soren Baker Show, and Richie Abbott.
In the beginning, hip-hop was ruled by the East Coast. Then the West Coast rose to prominence, thanks to gangster rap.
Straight out of Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube.
Hip-hop changed the world. Gangster rap changed the narrative.
I'm representing for the gangsters all across the world.
And then changed the world again.
Cause I'll come and take your life away.
The history of gangster rap features unheard stories, unseen photos and documents, all with exclusive interviews from the founders and players who shaped gangster rap.
I think a real gangster rapper has to scare you a little bit.
The history of gangster rap, written by veteran rap journalist Soren Baker. In stores now.
Yo, what up? This is DJ Quick. Be sure to pick up my homeboy Soren Baker's book, The History of Gangster Rap, if you really want to know what we do.
Be sure to check out the History of Gangster Rap by Soren Baker. He's official.
History of Gangster Rap features exclusive interviews with Ice-T, Snoop Dogg, MC Ren, the D.O.C, and dozens of others. The History of Gangster Rap, a definitive look at how Los Angeles changed rap forever.
In Los Angeles, the streets definitely set the tone of the hip-hop music.
A 19, I got a $50,000 car.
My whole angle always was, I'll be street, but I will always tell you the horrors that go along with this life.
It would be penalties and casualties for just wearing the wrong color in somebody's neighborhood.
And once gangster rap made it from the streets to the TV, the genre exploded.
With Fab 5 on your TV back with NWA.
Yo MTV, it just catapulted us from being local heroes to national gangbang rappers.
The History of Gangster Rap discusses it all from 1980 up till today.
It's always gonna be shit happening in the streets. You know what I mean? So it's always gonna be something to talk about.
The History of Gangster Rap in stores now.